There were so many huge storylines in the sports world in 2021, but 2022 is going to be even bigger, and there's so much still up in the air. I'm here with Steve Simmons, Rob Longley, and John McCarthy, all from the Toronto Sun. Steve, we're going to start with you. We know the NHL players are probably not going to the Olympics, but there are a whole bunch of other storylines in 2022. What are you most interested in seeing?
Well, the first storyline I think everybody has to talk about is health. You know, what happens with COVID? What happens with leagues? What happens with the Olympics? What happens with baseball once it's eventually playing and not locked out? And so you get all of those, questions about who's playing and when are they playing and how are they playing and all of that. So we start the year that way. And like everything else in Toronto, it always comes back to the Maple Leafs. This has been, to date, a very impressive Leaf season. Matthews doing what he's doing, Jack Campbell doing what he's doing, Morgan Riley playing the best hockey of his life, Willie Nylander playing the best hockey of his life. Can these guys, all playing the best hockey of their lives, finally have that playoff run that we've been looking for so many years? And you look back to last year and you think they're up 3-1 on Montreal and they can't find a way to win the series. And Montreal goes on and plays for the Stanley Cup. Well, a lot of Toronto people will probably be thinking that was our cup, or that was our cup to play for. And of course, it was another first round elimination and a whole lot of questions asked. And those questions will come up again in May. And we start all over again, but there's more reason for optimism right now than there's been in a very long time.
But do people even care now, Steve? Do people not even start to care until May? Because we've seen this too many years in a row, and we've seen what happens in the spring. Like what happens in the winter with this team is next to meaningless, isn't it, right now?
Well, yes and no. I think what's meaningful is, can you finish ahead of Tampa? I think that's really important. In that division, if you say you're in the 2-3 slot and you've got to open for a playoff first round, and you're playing the two-time Stanley Cup champions, that's a lot different than finishing first and getting the 8th seed in a wild card team. And so I think finishing first is really important for the Leafs if they can do that. If not, just keeping playing at the level that Sheldon Keefe wants them playing at. And you're right, this whole season has been about what happens in May. That's been the whole season. But we're seeing that they're getting to places they haven't been before. Can that carry, even beyond this COVID break, can that carry into January and February and March, where the team gets better and better? That's going to be the question with the Leafs, I believe.
So what happens then if, let's say, horrors of all horrors, the Leafs go out in the first round again? What happens to that team then, Steve?
Well, I think the first thing is somebody's going to lose their job. Whether that's Brendan Shanahan, the president, whether that's Kyle Dubas, the general manager. And if Kyle Dubas goes, whether it's Sheldon Keefe, the coach, you only get so many chances. It's sports. You're paid to win. You only get so many chances, and they've had more than their share of them.
I mean, if Bergevin can lose his job without his starting goalie and his best defenseman, I think Dubas is in pretty tough if he's got his guys for all these years and can't get it done.
Yeah, the only difference is the ownership of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment it's not the firing kind of ownership that we see in places where there's individuals that own teams.
Ask Brian Burke about that. Ask Mike Babcock about that.
Yeah, in those cases, those guys they lost in Burke's case, he lost his job away from hockey. Babcock might have as well, but they didn't do the firings. They don't come in and say, Brendan, fire that guy. And that's the one thing that operates, the Leafs and the Raptors and those teams, they operate differently than having a singular owner who will say, like Ed Rogers can say, I want Mark Shapiro gone, and he's gone. That's the way it works. It doesn't work that way with MLSE.
So let's flip it over to the Blue Jays. Rob, again, they've got the same pressures. They were one game out of a playoff spot last year. Tell me, what kind of pressure is that team facing? Young guys, pressure to be in the playoffs. They went out, got Kevin Gausman. Tell me a little bit about what you think is on the horizon for the Jays.
Well, first of all, I'm spending most of my winter trying to decide if I'm on the side of the billionaire owners or the millionaire players that are locked out right now. It's just going to be I mean, before we can really talk seriously about the Jays, we got to see how this whole thing unfolds. The lockout that started on December 1st. My opinion is we're not even going to see negotiations start until probably early in February, which means part of spring training is going to get wiped out. And then the hope is that you get the season started on time. And I think more than any team in Major League Baseball, the Blue Jays might be a team that would pay the price from a delayed start or an extended lockout, because this team was the hottest team in baseball for much of the second half of the season. As you mentioned, Mark, just missed the playoffs by one game. And they really were expecting to build on that momentum and carry it into 2022. So the lockout is going to affect the Jays as much or more than anybody else. But, I think what we have to look at in terms of are they going to be able to take that next step is, have they reached their ceiling yet? So many players had career type years last year. Can Vlad Guerrero Jr. follow up on what he did? Can Jordan Romano be the ace of the bullpen, the closer that he was last year? Can Kevin Gausman, the new pitcher, can he replace Robbie Ray, who won the Cy Young Award? So the offseason isn't done yet because of the lockout. The Jays still need to improve some, but there's still some questions for a very good baseball team heading into the season.
Well, one of the things that, I have no questions for the most part about returning players. I have questions about the roster as a whole.
Agreed.
They had Marcus Semien. He's gone. You can't replace Marcus Semien. So you're going to have to find some way. So with Marcus Semien gone, it means you have questions now at second base and at third base. And, with Steven Matz gone, you have questions of a reliable fifth starter in that circumstance. And Buck Showalter, who just got the Mets job as manager, was saying the other day, if you want to look at a team and analyze them properly, don't tell me about their 1 and 2 starters. Tell me about their 3, 4, and 5, and tell me about who's batting 7, 8, and 9 in their lineup. There you're going to see. So who's batting 7, 8, and 9 for the Jays and who's pitching? We don't know yet, because they lost 2 very good players to free agency that they haven't replaced. They did replace Ray with almost a similar statistical pitcher. So I think that's a wash. But what happens with the other guys? That's the challenge for Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro.
Also, let's hope they play in Toronto again, right? I mean, baseball is the least vaccinated of the major league sports other than the NFL, which isn't a factor here. And the current federal regulations are going to make that very interesting to see who can come to Toronto to play baseball next year. And it's going to be an interesting offseason in the political realm that way for the Blue Jays to get clearance to come back to the Rogers Center after having to spend 2/3 of last year in Buffalo and Dunedin.
Okay, I do want to get your guys' thoughts on one quick thing. We've seen Wander Franco, Fernando Tatis, they signed these massive 10-year-long deals. Should the Jays lock up Vlad or Bo or both?
Of course they should, but that's much easier said than done. And you have to figure that those discussions have already begun behind the scenes, and they basically factor into every decision the team makes, because while they've been aggressive in shopping in free agency the last couple of winters, they know that with each of those guys, there's going to be literally hundreds of millions tied up over multiple seasons, and that's going to have to come down probably over the next year or so. I don't see them doing it this year, but when we're having this discussion a year from now, I could definitely be seeing them talking about extending both of those guys. And Guerrero especially is going to be well north of $200 million, if you could even fathom that.
There's no salary cap in baseball, but every team has a budget, and you have to work within your budget, which is essentially a salary cap per team. And the Blue Jays are in the situation, it reminds me of the Chicago Blackhawks a number of years ago. Chicago won the Stanley Cups before they signed Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane to enormous contracts. Then they signed them, and the team's gone downhill since. The Jays are going to have to put minimum $60 million a year into Guerrero and Bichette when the time comes, which means they won't be able to get that extra pitcher. They won't be able to get that second baseman they need and that kind of thing. So there's an onus really on them to try and win now, to try and win before those guys hit the big money, because once they hit the big money, it's harder and harder when you're dealing with, especially with a Canadian dollar that's 25% less, when you're dealing with budgets rather than salary caps.
It's like in the NFL when you've got your quarterback on his rookie deal. That's your perfect Goldilocks window to win. And once you pay them $30-40 million a year, it's a lot harder to fill out the rest of your roster. Jays don't have a salary cap at least to worry about, but I guess we'll see, how much they're willing to spend.
They have Ed Rogers to worry about. That may be worse.
John, I know normally you cover golf. Tiger, he came back. He's back on the green. Tell me about the storylines you're excited for in 2022.
Yeah, well, there's a few golf wins for sure. I mean, the 150th Open Championship is at the Old Course in St. Andrews, which is one of the, the great venues for any sporting event. So that's going to be amazing, especially if Tiger plays then. And it's also, I'm looking forward to sort of the festival tournaments and events coming back to Canada, the RBC Canadian Open, the CP Women's Open, the Formula One Montreal Grand Prix. These are all sort of big summer events that are parties in our country that we haven't had in years. And, Golf Canada relies a lot on the money they make from the RBC Canadian Open. And it's time to come back. And I just hope that it all works out. And that with Formula One being so hot, the Montreal Grand Prix would be as popular as ever if it came back. One storyline sort of away from sports I'm interested in is not about sports, but how we consume them. It's changing. We used to be, you'd watch it on TV or maybe on your car and the radio, but now I'm watching that Manning cast for the Monday night game every week that it's on. And I'm loving that. And I want to see how that expands because I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to start seeing these alternate broadcasts for sort of any niche thing, like maybe a gambling broadcast or a fantasy broadcast or an analytics one. And on the golf side, PGA Tour Live is expanding all of its streaming options. So you're going to get a lot more. They've hired a ton more broadcasters. You're going to see more players at the Masters and the Players Championship already. You can watch every shot of any player in the field. So gone are the days when we're sort of hoping to see, Corey Connors in the background when Phil Mickelson's hitting a shot. You just click a few buttons and you can watch every shot of Mackenzie Hughes, Corey Connors at the Masters. And that's already there. So I'm excited to see sort of how we consume sports changes in 2022.
Well, I'm too old to understand so much of the technology that's now going on, from streaming to 5G to what you can do with your phone and all the stuff that J-Mac just referred to. But I am old enough to have gambled for a very long time, and I'm very interested in sports gambling, as Rob is as well. And what we're seeing right now is a preponderance of advertising from online betting services. And I don't think we've never seen this before, and certainly we've never seen this much before. And it's fascinating to me because it's a little bit like the marijuana business. When marijuana was legalized, everybody thought they were going to get rich. And now, some guys did get rich, but a lot of people did not and went out of business. And I think this is going to happen here too. Some of the sites are going to become enormous and some of them are going to disappear. But it's going to be fascinating to see who wins and who loses in all of this. And there's media companies now also involved in trying to see how they can cash in on sports gambling.
Yeah, as someone who watches sports, for a long time, it is so weird to start seeing the live odds being shown during the broadcast. It used to sort of be taboo and there'd be some sort of wink references, but now it's right there on the screen. The odds are changing and it really is, it's blowing up huge.
Well, Al Michaels on Monday Night Football, when a field goal is made late in a game, will say something like, well, there's the over. Or, years before, broadcasters weren't even allowed to mention a line. And now they're telling you while the game is on, well, if they score the touchdown here, the bettors will be very happy.
It's going to affect the way we do our jobs too. Just last week when I was at Tiger's return in Florida, which was pretty exciting to see, of course. But before they gave me my media pass, you had to sign a disclaimer saying that you will not reveal any information that you might see in a locker room that would pertain to anything medical. So in other words, if you saw a guy bandaging up his leg or something like that was sort of behind the scenes that might pertain to how a betting line would unfold, you're essentially agreeing not to report what you've seen in that regard.
And how long till we see our first gambling scandals? If it's being, more widespread and everything's legal to bet on, it might not be the NFL or, the NHL, but what about, Division 2 or 3 college? If someone gets to some of these players and we have our first big scandal, it might change dramatically sort of the direction this thing's heading.
Well, haven't we seen it in tennis overseas already? I mean, there's been tennis match fixing.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is so much crazy betting going on between prop bets and other things like that. I have a 31-year-old son who loves prop bets. And on Sunday, the Carolina place kicker got injured in the warm-ups for the Buffalo Bills game. And because of that, he could not kick. So my son watching this makes a bet, 4-1 were the odds, that Carolina would get a 2-point conversion, which they did because they didn't have a kicker. And so that's you're going to be able to go into arenas like you can in Washington right now, and you're going to be able to bet on who scores in the second period of a hockey game. Is Ovechkin going to score this period or not? You can go to the props window and bet like it's a casino. And you're going to see that. That's going to be at Scotiabank. It's going to be at all the arenas in Canada before too long. They're all going to turn into mini casinos.
Yeah, at the height of COVID, I was betting on Russian ping pong. So I guess there you go. If we're betting on Russian ping pong, it's what else is there to bet on?
Pickleball injuries.
So why don't we end it with who's winning Super Bowl next year?
This is the weirdest football season I can remember, because every time a team looks good, they then fall back. And every time a team falls back, they then look good. The Kansas City Chiefs, as we speak today, look to be the best team again in the NFL at this moment. And I stress this moment because we've had, early in the season, I thought they looked terrible. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs for this moment, and I will deny any of this like 5 minutes from now.
I'll have to go with the Green Bay Packers, actually. I don't know if anyone can see that, but there's one reason why. But their problem's always been defense, and this year they look to have a defense. Their defense is playing great without their two best players, Zadarius Smith and Jair Alexander, both been hurt for weeks and weeks and weeks. They're both going to be back, hopefully, for the playoff run. So I'll take the Packers.
Well, I was going to take the Packers just to jinx it for J-Mac because he's been a lifelong Packers fan. And they certainly are, I think, a more well-rounded team. They've been contenders for years now, but I think they're much more well-rounded now, better defensively than they've been. But we can't be on the same page. So let's go to the New England Patriots, right? The team that everybody wanted to write off this year. Just because they've lost one game this year, people are thinking that the magic is done. But they won 7 in a row. The AFC East is there for the taking. Bill Belichick, proven in Super Bowls. Why not give them a shot?
I want to go back to Green Bay for 1 second. Aaron Rodgers is one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks we've seen in our lives, in my opinion. He has 1 Super Bowl. That's all. And you think Roethlisberger has 2, and a lot of guys that are less than Eli Manning has 2, and a lot of guys that are less than Aaron Rodgers have way more Super Bowls than him. And so, yeah, this would be a good catch-up year for him because he probably should have about 4 by now.
Yeah, and he's tied with Brett Favre in Super Bowl wins and MVPs. So if he could get both of those, it would put him over the top, I'm pretty sure. Knowing him, that's something he'd want to do.
Okay, thanks, guys. You can read more from Steve, Rob, and John in the pages of the Toronto Sun. Let us know what you think down below. And head over to thetorontosun.com to sign up for Steve's Simmons Says newsletter, as well as John McCarthy's Monday Morning Golf.